The cup that never ran dry, a story of abundance and gratitude. There was once a woman named Clara who lived in a small town where the seasons were gentle and the days felt long. She was known by everyone for her kindness, her careful way of speaking, and the way she always carried a notebook, a small, worn journal that went everywhere she did. But what most people didn't know was that Clara had been living under a quiet cloud of lack, not material lack, but emotional scarcity. She woke up every morning thinking about what she didn't have. The house she still rented, the job that didn't feel fulfilling, the relationships that never seemed to go deeper than polite conversation. To the world, she looked composed and content. But inside, she felt like her life was a cup that was always just one drop away from empty. One chilly morning in October, Clara sat at her kitchen table with her coffee, the same brand she bought every week, the same chipped mug she'd had for years. Outside, a storm had rolled in overnight. The power was flickering. The rain was heavy. Her phone buzzed with notifications she didn't want to read, bills, work emails, reminders of things she hadn't yet done. She sighed and whispered aloud, "There's never enough. Not time, not money, not energy." Just as she said it, the lights went out completely. The storm had knocked out the power. For a few moments, she sat there in the dim morning light, frustrated, anxious, ready to give up on the day before it had even begun. Then, she did something she hadn't done in years. She reached for a candle. She found one buried in a drawer, half-used, lavender-scented, dust on the rim. She lit it, and the soft glow filled the room. And in that tiny flame, something inside her shifted. It wasn't a voice exactly, more like a nudge. A gentle thought that whispered, "Look around. There is still light." That morning, with the power out and the rain pouring, Clara opened her notebook and wrote one sentence. "I have enough right now." She stared at those words for a long time. She didn't fully believe them yet, but something about writing them down felt powerful, like an invitation instead of a declaration. So, she began listing what she did have. A warm home, even if rented. Coffee, even if cheap. A heart that still cared. Hands that still worked. Rain that still fell, watering a world she couldn't see. For the first time in months, her shoulders dropped. The tension loosened. The storm outside no longer felt like an interruption. It felt like an invitation to slow down. As the day went on, she kept writing things she was grateful for, even tiny ones. The smell of rain. The hum of the candle flame. The quiet. By the time the lights came back on that evening, something inside her had already been restored. The next morning, Clara carried her little notebook to the cafe down the street. The same cafe she used to rush through, phone in hand, eyes on her to-do list. But that day, she decided to sit by the window, to actually see her surroundings. She watched an elderly couple share a muffin. She noticed the barista smiling at a child. She heard laughter from a table behind her. And once again, she wrote in her notebook, "There is enough love in this world for me." Day by day, this quiet practice became a ritual. She didn't post about it. She didn't tell anyone. But she started to see the beauty in everything, in the ordinary, the overlooked, the imperfect. And as she grew more grateful, she grew more abundant. She stopped hoarding worry. She stopped comparing her life to others. She started giving her time, her kindness, her attention. When a friend needed someone to talk to, she listened without glancing at the clock. When she walked through the park, she picked wildflowers and left them on neighbors' doorsteps. When her co-worker forgot lunch, she shared half of hers, smiling as she said, "There's always enough to share." The funny thing was, as Clara gave more came back. She didn't give to receive, but life has a way of returning whatever energy we send out. She was offered a new position at work, one that matched her gifts perfectly. Her landlord lowered her rent unexpectedly. New friendships bloomed, genuine, deep connections that filled the loneliness she'd once carried. And one day, while journaling at her kitchen table again, she looked at that same chipped mug, the one she'd once resented, and smiled. She realized the cup had never been empty. It had been refilling all along. She just hadn't been looking closely enough. A few weeks later, Clara met a woman at the park, a stranger sitting alone on a bench, shoulders heavy with the same invisible weight Clara used to carry. They started talking. The woman confessed, "I feel like I'm always running out of hope, out of time, out of joy." Clara smiled softly and handed her the notebook. On the very first page, in her handwriting, it still said, "I have enough right now." She said, "Start here." Gratitude doesn't wait for the storm to pass. It teaches you to dance in the rain. The woman laughed, a little surprised. "That sounds hard." "It is at first," Clara replied. "But the more you practice, the easier it gets." Gratitude doesn't change what you have, it changes how you see it. And when your vision changes, your life expands. They sat together quietly for a while, watching children play. Birds dart through the air, leaves scatter in the wind. Before they parted, the woman handed Clara her coffee cup, a simple paper one, and said, "For you. It's not much." Clara smiled and said, "It's everything." Over the next few months, gratitude became Clara's compass. Whenever worry tried to creep back in, she whispered, "Thank you," instead of "what if." When she felt anxious about the future, she looked around and named 5 things that were working in her favor right now. When she caught herself comparing, she reminded herself, "Someone, somewhere, is praying for what I already have." And gradually, that small daily practice transformed her from scarcity to satisfaction, from doubt to delight. She no longer needed a long list of accomplishments to feel abundant. She was abundant because she was awake. Her life began to overflow again, not because everything was perfect, but because her perspective was. Gratitude had taught her the secret she'd been missing all along. The cup of life never runs dry. It just waits for you to notice how full it already is. If you're listening to this right now and you've been feeling like your cup is empty, take a moment to breathe. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to have more to feel more. You just have to notice. Look around your life. Find one thing, one tiny thing, to be grateful for. Maybe it's the sound of the rain. Maybe it's the air that fills your lungs. Maybe it's the fact that you've survived every hard day you thought you couldn't. Start there. Write it down. Whisper, "Thank you." And watch how your life starts to expand. Because abundance doesn't come from chasing more. It comes from noticing what's already enough. You're listening to Abundance Mindset with Eloise, reminding you that peace, purpose, and prosperity begin within.